I've been told yins is Pittsburghian for y'all. But then someone told me it's pronounced like Ewins.
Well, then where's the OU in that?
Yeah.
It's YINZ.
I saw what I saw, and I saw yins.
Yeah, Yins.
I don't know. We'll need someone from Pittsburgh to call in just to give us
Yins
the
making that up.
Yeah. Which
Got 'em.
departure will the Seahawks feel most? Curtis Rogers in for Michael Bumpus today. Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Will Disley all released by this team. Nick Bellore reportedly will part ways with the team today. Meanwhile, Bobby Wagner is set to be a free agent. It's not like the team's moving on, but we've heard reports that they will not re-sign him. So we're looking at Quandre, Jamal, Bobby, Will, Nick Bellore. Which departure will the Seahawks feel most? I have my answer, but Curtis, I will give you the floor.
I'm looking at this list, and let's start with the ones that I don't think they are going to feel the most. And I hate to go with Nick Bellore first off. I mean, he was tremendous.
He's a comedic talent.
Yeah, I was going to say he was tremendous in Between Two Bellores. He has really cornered the awkward cringe comedy, which I think is really hard to master, especially when you're a pro athlete. Like so many pro athletes have it in their mind that they're like, if I'm just loud, that means I'm funny. But Nick Bellore's subtle in his humor, and I appreciate that. But he's a special teamer. Like, he's on the field probably the least amount of all these guys that have that are confirmed or likely to leave. We have Bobby Wagner on this list, so we'll just lump Bobby in the likely. After that, I think I go Jamal probably.
Before Will?
Before Will Disley, yeah. I think Will is a really good blocker, somebody that can help out offensively, which then I would have Disley after Jamal, which then leaves Quandre Diggs and Bobby Wagner 1 and 2. I think Quandre is going to be the one that they feel the most. And I say that because of those 5, I think he is still closest to what his peak was in the NFL. And then also Quandre means a lot to that locker room. He means a lot to all the guys on that roster. He's somebody that I think every team should be jumping in line for to bring him in just as a culture fit. He feels like a guy that could assimilate to any locker room in the NFL and just kind of be a welcoming presence to have on your team. That is why I think his departure is going to be felt the most, and obviously he still can play at a good level in the NFL.
2 really good points. The leadership one especially is one that when the news first happened, we weren't having a conversation about, well, how do you replace your defensive captain? Bobby was one of them, but Quandre obviously the other. The conversation was, okay, well, what's the cap space look like? What do you do now? What do you do at safety? What safeties do you have on the roster? Now, days removed, we can get into the conversation of, well, how do you feel different as a team? And you're right. You feel different as a team, as a defense, without Quandre Diggs. I mean, I think that I heard from a lot of players, particularly defensive linemen, young defensive linemen, that mentioned Jaron Reed as a guy, who they look to as a leader. And each, level of the defense will kind of have their guy. Like Quandre's not going to go jawing with linebackers and telling them necessarily what to do. Like that's kind of Bobby's job.
Yeah.
But there is now an absence and a void that will need to be filled. And last time I checked, Jordan Brooks, who we all were wondering if he'd step into that role, not on the roster.
Right.
Is that Julian Love? Is that Devin Witherspoon? Who's only in his second year? Like, who does that become?
I can't remember a time in the recent past where the Seahawks have been so lacking, like those voices in the locker room, the guys that people kind of look to, and it's like, all right, tell us what to do. Like Bobby Wagner, kind of the last of that breed, but Quandre is there too. But of the holdovers now, I mean, who's the adult in the room? It's been so long. Even in Pete's early days with the Seahawks, they had guys like Lawyer Malloy and Matt Hasselbeck. They were here to help guide everybody along. And then you saw the leadership of the Legion of Boom era Seahawks kind of morph and evolve from, all these rookies that were kind of scared to grab the mic. And then by the end of it, you couldn't get those guys away from the cameras. Like it'll be interesting to see how leadership evolves over time with Mike McDonald and how this team kind of builds that aspect of it, because I think you need to have those guys in your locker room if you're going to be a successful NFL team.
I think also pointing to really feeling the absence of Quandre adds the risk factor and the gamble factor to what John Schneider has had to do. I think that it is easy for us to look at the salary cap hit for all of these guys and think, well, of course you're moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately it is the right decision. You needed salary cap space, so you needed to part ways with guys who were maybe older, who had bloated contracts, who you didn't want to restructure because of their age, whatever. But that decision in itself is still really difficult and is still really hard, because if you're John Schneider, you're moving on from a guaranteed answer at safety. Quandre is going to be a starter wherever he signs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happens with Jamal. I don't know what happens with a couple other guys. Bobby's a starter where he goes, but like Quandre was one of your best players and has been one of your best defensive players on a defense that hasn't been able to do a ton. And I understand the decision, but when we aren't serious about really feeling that departure, we strip away some of the tough decision that John Schneider had to make. That's not an easy one.